In our lesson for March the 8th, we're going to look at another of the minor prophets of the Old Testament, this one whose name is Zephaniah. And like I did on Nahum, I want to give a little personal background to set the context for the lesson. Although the name Zephaniah is a common name in the Old Testament, it appears several places other than in this particular book. Scholars believe that none of those other Zephaniahs can be identified with this particular prophet. His name means hidden or protected by God. The references in verse 4 and verse 10 and 11 suggest that he lived in the city of Jerusalem. Notice the book differs from Nahum and from all the other ones that you'll see during the quarter by identifying his heritage. He says that this is Zephaniah, son of Cushai, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Hezekiah. So he traces his lineage back 4 generations. So why does he do that? And who is this Hezekiah that he traces his lineage back to? Well, the traditional answer is that Hezekiah was the king and that he is tracing himself back to King Hezekiah. And so what we probably have here is a man who was kind of in the royal line who now becomes a prophet of God. He prophesied during the reign of Josiah. Again, different from Nahum. Nahum didn't identify when he prophesied, but Zephaniah is during the reign of Josiah. Now, Josiah was king from 640 to 608 BC, king of Judah, which was the southern kingdom, 640 to 608 BC. So sometime in that period of time, Zephaniah gives his prophecy. But exactly when? A key date is 621. 621, they discovered a book of the law in the temple, which was actually what we would consider the Pentateuch, the early part of the Old Testament. They began to read that, and there was a religious revival in the land, 621. So some people say that Zephaniah is dealing with conditions that don't fit a time of spiritual renewal. So it must have been before 621. And that's probably a good guide to go by. So before 621, Zephaniah gives this prophecy. But specifically when? Another thing that helps us is the mood of the book implies a pending invasion by someone. And we do know that in 626 BC, the Scythian invasion came, and perhaps what he's talking about here in this book is that invasion in 626 BC. So we can pretty well pinpoint the date of the prophecy. We know the person, Zephaniah, prophesies as one of the minor prophets of Israel. Now, if you'll read the book, just read through it, you'll get depressed pretty quickly. It's kind of like a funeral dirge. In fact, it's actually written in a cadence, we might say a poetic form that was used for funeral dirges. So other than the book of Obadiah, this is probably the heaviest book of the Old Testament. One Old Testament scholar says it is the fiercest of the prophets. Now, even though it has this fierce mood, it picks up on some of the common themes of the earlier prophets. For example, for his idea of judgment, he seems to rely heavily on Amos. If you look at Amos chapter 5, verses 18 to 20, you'll get kind of a similar theme to the message of judgment that we have here in Zephaniah. He also picks up from Isaiah the idea of a remnant. Judgment will come, but not all of Israel will be destroyed. God will preserve a remnant, an idea that Isaiah talked about in chapter 10, verses 20 to 23. So some common